Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Today, me and here we are going to talk about the case of Barry Morphew. Barry Morphew is a Colorado man who has just been rearrested and indicted for the first-degree homicide of his wife Suzanne Morphew, who went missing during a bike ride on Mother's Day, May 9th, 10th of 2020, near Salida, Colorado. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through the indictment and then we'll do summarize of the case at the end.
Good morning, Katya. I mean,
Hey,
TCA.
that's fine.
All of those names. Yeah, so the grand jury indictment, I guess we're going to go over that first. And then let
Mhm.
me move us to where we're a little tiny and I'll make this bigger. This is 10 pages. This came out yesterday uh, for the first degree homicide of his wife, as you stated. And so it's the people of the state of Colorado versus Barry Morphew. This is not his first indictment. As a matter of fact, this is the second time he's been indicted, but this one I think is going to stick. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes. I'm going to
Yeah,
make this
because there's
bigger.
new evidence and new information that has come out about this case. So yeah,
They knew he was trash before. They've just solidified it with a little more evidence, and obviously they found her remains a while back. So um, they just wanted to make sure they had a solid case. You don't want to take a chance of him getting off on
on
what
this
he.
again
Yeah.
after what happened last time.
So count one, it's the homicide in the first degree after deliberation on or about May 9th to May 10th, 2020, in or tribal in the state of Colorado, Barry Morphew unlawfully, feloniously, after deliberation and with intent to cause the death of a person other than himself, caused the death of Suzanne Morphew in violation of, obviously, all of the statutes in the land of do not um, off your spouse. Probable cause for count one is as follows. At five, are you able to see that and read that well?
Yeah,
Okay,
all good.
very good. At 5:46 p.m. on May the 10th, 2020, it was Mother's Day, Sunday. Suzanne Morphew was reported missing to police by her neighbor. The last known person to see her alive was her husband, Barry Morphew. Investigators responded to Morphew residence at Salida, Colorado, to investigate the missing person report. The house was locked. Suzanne Morphew was not home. Her vehicle was in the garage. Her vehicle was in the garage. There were no signs of forced entry, and her bike was missing. Later that evening, her bike was located down a hillside off a dirt road between her house and Highway 50. The bike was located less than a mile from the Morphew home. On May 14th, 2020, her bike helmet was located 10 meters off the side of Highway 50, approximately 1.52 miles west of the Morphew home and approximately 0.84 miles west of where her bike was located. Sounds scary already.
I know it sounds like the beginning of a horror movie.
Yeah, you can't make this stuff up, right?
Yeah.
Barry Morphew was interviewed and told police that he set his alarm and woke up at 4:30 a.m. on May the 10th, 2020. He told police that he left at 5 a.m. on May 10th, 2020 for a pre-planned work trip in Broomfield, Colorado. Why would you factually, knowing you have children, pre-plan a work trip on a Sunday on Mother's Day
On
when you
Mother's
should be
Day.
celebrating your wife?
Exactly, that's what I was just thinking, It's like, why? That sounds sus. But
Yeah, for
okay.
sure. According to Barry Morphew, Suzanne Morphew was still asleep in bed when he left the house at 5 a.m. on Monday or on May 10th, 2020. He told police she planned to ride her bike that day. Barry Morphew stated that upon arriving in Broomfield that morning, he checked into a hotel before leaving shortly after the job site. Leaving shortly after for the job site. I'm sorry, I was like that was read out of context. He checked into a hotel before leaving shortly after for the job site. He told police that he received a call around 5 p.m. on May 10th, 2020 from his neighbors while physically at the Broomfield job site. The neighbors told Barry Morphew that his daughters were concerned because they could not reach Suzanne all day. Yeah, it's Mother's Day, bro. Like,
Yeah, but that sounds like why it's a bit weird. I mean, every family has their dynamics, but at least on Mother's Day.
That's true also. Barry instructed the neighbors to check the house and specifically to look for her bike. The neighbors reported to Barry that neither Suzanne nor the bike were at home, and Barry then instructed them to call the sheriff. Police interviewed one of Barry's employees scheduled to assist him with the Broomfield job. The employee told law enforcement that the employee and Barry were not planning to leave for Broomfield until the evening hours of May 10th, 2020.
Oh,
They were supposed to drive together. Instead, Barry left without telling the employee. Barry called the employee at approximately 11:18 a.m. and informed the employee that he had left without him. When the employee arrived in Broomfield on Sunday evening, the employee noticed that Barry Morphew had failed to bring the proper tools with him for the job, and the necessary materials for the job had not yet arrived at the job site.
that's sus.
Yeah, it was Sunday. I mean, they're not going to drop off the materials for the job because it was Sunday. Everybody else is enjoying Mother's Day with
Mother's
their
Day,
family.
but no, it is sus that he left early because if he left early, that means like he had plenty of time to grab stuff or have it ready and have the tools because the tools he probably already had with him or
Yeah,
had it because
you
if it
you would
was his
think.
job, you would think. So
Yeah.
how come he was there without the tools? That sounds a bit weird.
Well, this is where it gets weirder. So, review of the cameras at the hotel and nearby businesses revealed that Barry Morphew was in the Broomfield area for approximately 9 hours and 45 minutes. Of those hours, he spent less than 1/2 hour at the job site. Instead,
Huh.
besides two brief visits to the job site area, electronic evidence and cameras from businesses showed him driving around to various locations and discarding unknown items in separate trash cans. Hotel footage then showed Barry Morphew arriving back at his hotel room and remaining inside the room from approximately 12:34 p.m. to 5:55 p.m. Inconsistent with his statement to police, he was in the hotel and not at the job site when he received the call about his wife, Suzanne Morphew, being unresponsive and missing.
And I mean, if you get a call that's saying your wife is not home, the bike is not there, that you say that she's gone, and your reply is, "Oh, just call the police, hang up, and move on with your day."
Yeah,
Hmm?
exactly. Then to know that he wasn't actually on the job site, he was just
Yeah,
sitting in there chilling in the hotel, probably watching movies or sleeping or
I
whatever he
think he was
does.
building alibi by being in the hotel
Possibly.
because
In early
the hotel has cameras, so maybe.
I mean, and he would have we're bound to know that, right, in these
Yeah.
years. In early interviews with Barry Morphew, he told law enforcement that his marriage to Suzanne Morphew was the best and that the two had a wonderful weekend together. When Barry was asked whether Suzanne would say anything different about the relationship, Barry stated no. Barry Morphew's statements about his marriage to Suzanne were inconsistent with other witness accounts and evidence located. Specifically, investigators learned that Suzanne confided in people that she was unhappy in the marriage in the weeks and months leading to her disappearance. She
So
discussed
how sorry to interrupt you, but
no,
how can your marriage be the best and a wonderful weekend when you went to work on Mother's Day on Sunday? A weekend in my part of the world is Saturday and Sunday, not just
same,
Saturday.
same.
So wonderful weekend, but you disappeared on Sunday to go to work.
Well said.
Huh?
Yeah, well said. She discussed plans to divorce Barry Morphew with her close friend. She maintained documented notes of problems in the relationship
Oh.
recovered from electronic devices and the physical search of the Morphew home. Suzanne Morphew had been having a secret affair with an old acquaintance who lived out of state. She communicated with him daily over LinkedIn and WhatsApp. Suzanne's last known electronic message to anyone was to this person on May 2020 at 2:11 p.m., just 32 minutes before Barry Morphew returned to the home that day. An overall timeline of the week of Suzanne Morphew's disappearance shows that the disappearance coincided with her daughter, the only other occupant of the Morphew residence, leaving on a pre planned road trip out of state. Because of this, okay, okay. So the timeline of the week of her disappearance shows that the disappearance coincided with her daughter leaving on a pre-planned trip out of state. So maybe that's why they may have
Yeah,
called and said happy Mother's Day, but maybe they weren't all together that day. So that makes sense too. Like you
that's
said,
that.
different homes,
Yeah,
different dynamics.
exactly.
Because of this, Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew expected to be alone at the residence starting on May 5th, 2020, until either late in the day on May 10th or into May 11th, 2020. Suzanne Morphew drove to Gunnison, Colorado on May 5th to depart with her sister and friend on the planned road trip. After May 5th, Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew were alone at the house. Oh,
Okay.
drove the daughter to Gunnison. Okay, so I was trying to figure out what that redaction was. So she drove her daughter to Gunnison to leave with her sister and friend on that road trip. So after May 5th, Barry Morphew and Suzanne were alone at the house. A forensic download of Barry Morphew's cell phone revealed that Barry Morphew had deleted a text chain with Suzanne Morphew from which an image of a single text remained. A screenshot of this single text message was saved on Barry Morphew's phone on May the 6th. The image revealed a text from Suzanne that stated, "I'm done. I could care less what you're up to and have been for years. We just need to figure this out civilly."
Ooh, that goes but against his claim that they had a wonderful marriage and the best weekend.
Yeah, that tracks, right? On May 11th, 2020, authorities commenced a search of the Morphew residence that spanned several days. The state of the residence and vehicles showed no signs of a break in or intruder. Even with no signs of a break in or intruder, law enforcement collected items of potential evidence and DNA swabs. DNA and out and then DNA analysis of the swabs collected produced several DNA profile mixtures consistent with what would be expected in the common areas of a home or a vehicle. The mixture profiles were processed through offender databases and were compared to the profile of known individuals who may have been present in the vehicle or the residence. The results did not lead to any stranger or intruder suspects. So they did their due diligence on the DNA.
Yeah.
An expert in DNA analysis testified that law enforcement provided analysts with one of the partial profiles developed from the glove box of Suzanne Morphew's vehicle for further investigation using a keyboard search. This allowed for additional comparisons to profiles in more databases with less stringent quality control standards than the National DNA Index System for the limited purpose of creating possible investigative leads. So even did dummied it down and even did, sat there and like physically went through more like a keyboard search trying to find other people, not just, hey, we're going to stick with this guy. It's obviously him. They tried to find other matches outside of him.
Yeah.
The term match used by DNA analysis does not mean identical. Rather, a match only means that there were other profiles that could not be excluded at the limited number of,
Okay.
okay, of, I was going to say I couldn't even read it. I thought I was reading a yeah, my idiocy right there. Available from the partial profile for comparison. The expert explained that she then compared the matches from those databases to the partial profile from the mixture on the glove box and excluded those out of state profiles as not originating from the same contributor in all but 3 instances.
Hmm.
Finally, the expert explained that just because the profiles from those databases matched at the limited loci available for comparison, it did not mean that any of the people from the out of state profiles were the same person that contributed the partial profile to the mixture on the glove box. Law enforcement investigated those 3 partial matches obtained from 3 separate out of state sources and found no connection to the case. Law enforcement located a locked gun safe in the garage during the search of the Morphew residence. Inside the gun safe, law enforcement located a dart rifle or tranquilizer rifle positioned toward
Oh.
the front of the safe. Eek. Law enforcement
Mhm.
also found packages of new dart brand tranquilizer darts in the gun safe. The packages of darts included capped hypodermic needles inside of them, which were designed to load the darts. How scary! Ugh. Law,
That
law,
wow. I've never heard about darts and all of
Tranquilizer
wow.
darts, yeah. Law
Mm.
enforcement found one of those needle caps in the dryer after the dryer's contents were removed. Law enforcement also found men's shorts among the contents of the dryer that were removed prior to finding the needle cap. The shorts appeared consistent with the shorts that Barry Morphew was seen on video wearing on May the 9th, 2020. less than 1 hour before he returned to the Morphew residence. No tranquilizer formula was located during law enforcement's search of the home and vehicles.
Huh, interesting.
Right? We're on page 4, but there's a couple of pages that are just, blank. So we're almost to the end of this.
Yeah.
Police investigated the numerous electronic devices and Suzanne Morphew's social media accounts, searching among other things for proof of life. That investigation revealed that Suzanne Morphew had not communicated electronically with any living person after 2:11 p.m. on May the 9th, 2020. Her last possible activity on any account protected by password access was 3:08 p.m., over 24 hours prior to her being reported missing. Records showing her typical use of electronics and social media demonstrated that this was inconsistent with her typical pattern of life in the days leading up to her disappearance. Additionally, witnesses indicated they attempted to communicate with Suzanne Morphew throughout this time frame but received no response from her. These witnesses indicated that her lack of response was out of the ordinary.
Okay, so I have a question then already. Did anyone saw her going for that bike ride?
Well, no, I don't think so because it didn't happen. I don't,
Hmm. Okay.
or if it did, he, you know, I don't know. I don't think anybody saw her on the bike at all.
Okay,
I don't
so
think. I mean, I
I'm
don't think
thinking,
anybody's even seen or heard from her since 2:11 p.m. on the day before at all.
yeah, because I'm thinking, so maybe the bike ride was a cover-up story.
Right. Right. Barry Morphew's electronic devices were also analyzed. A download of the infotainment system on Barry Morphew's truck recovered telematics data showing the location and activity of his truck at certain times on May 9th and 10th of 2020. A download of Barry Morphew's cell phone showed additional location information. Based on data from his cell phone, Barry Morphew returned to the Morphew residence at 2:43 p.m. on May the 9th. The data did not show his phone or truck leaving the residence again until the morning of May 10th, 2020. The download of Barry Morphew's cell phone registered events related to his phone. An expert forensic analysis determined that some of these events were in fact Barry Morphew's phone being turned off during the time frame of May
Hmm.
9th into May 10th. Turning off a cellular device effectively disables its ability to record location information. Specifically, the forensic analysis noted that Barry Morphew's phone download showed it was turned off at 2:47 p.m. on May 9th. Only a few minutes after he arrived home at the residence where Suzanne Morphew sent her last electronic communication to anyone. At approximately 10:17 p.m. on May 9th, the phone was turned back on. Barry Morphew's cell phone was again turned off at 4:32 a.m. on May the 10th, prior to him leaving the residence on his trip to Broomfield, Colorado. It was not turned on again until 5:37 a.m. when location information showed him on the road already in the area of Johnson Village, Colorado. Testimony established that the times Barry Morphew turned off his phone corresponded to periods of time of significance in the case, where location information was consequently unavailable.
Huh. You know that what that's surround reminding me of the case of Brian Koberger that is also turned off the phone.
Mm, yeah, that's
Hmm.
a whole nother debacle there, huh?
Uh-huh.
Similarly, further analysis of the information from Barry Morphew's infotainment system, the telematics, in his truck showed an irregular gap in recorded activities, specifically from approximately words are hard right now. Specifically from approximately 3:49 a.m. to approximately 8:10 a.m. on May 10th, 2020. There is no recorded data registering on Barry's infotainment system. An indication of no truck activity from telematics is inconsistent with other facts developed from Barry Morphew's phone, surveillance footage, and Barry Morphew's statements about his activities on May 10th, 2020. Specifically, telematics data shows Barry Morphew arriving at his residence at 2:43 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. It then registers various other activities throughout the afternoon at the residence until it ceased at 9:52 p.m. on May 9th, 2020. The telematics data then showed activities resume from 3:25 a.m. to 3:49 a.m. on May the 10th at a GPS location consistent with his driveway. Barry Morphew reported to law enforcement that he was asleep during this time frame. From 3:49 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. on May the 10th, the infotainment system, or telematics, did not register any data despite the fact that Barry Morphew's cell phone indicated the device was in Johnson's Village at 5:37 a.m. on the date, and Barry reported being in his truck traveling to Broomfield at that time.
Hmm.
When recorded telematics data became available again in the records from the infotainment system, downloaded at 8:10 a.m. on May the 10th, corresponding GPS coordinates showed that Barry Morphew had already arrived in the area of Broomfield, Colorado. This gap in registered data is inconsistent with the pattern of telematics data captured in the days and weeks leading up to this event. So, did he do something to disconnect it himself?
You could.
Maybe I'm reading that wrong, or maybe it's because he's lying and it's just not consistent with what he said. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Phone records for both Suzanne Morphew and Barry Morphew were analyzed by expert investigators. The FBI CAS team analyzed phone records for both Barry Morphew and Suzanne Morphew to determine location information and device usage related to their cell phones. In Suzanne Morphew's phone records, there was no indication of any user initiated activity after the time Barry Morphew returned home at 2:43 p.m. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone device continued to connect through RTT data with the cell tower that services the Morphew home throughout the night of May the 9th into the early morning of May the 10th. These automated data connections, however, were consistent with the tower reaching out to the phone to determine its location and not initiated by the user of the device, obviously. After
Hmm.
4:23 a.m. on May the 10th, Suzanne's phone ceased to connect at all, ever again. Just 8 minutes later, Barry Morphew's cell phone data showed his phone ceased to connect starting at 4:31 a.m., consistent with the cell phone download showing it powering off at 4:32 a.m. Suzanne Morphew's cell phone never registered on any towers other than the tower consistent with the Morphew residence from the time Barry Morphew returned home from 2:43 p.m. on May 9th, 2020 to the time it ceased activity altogether at 4:23 a.m. on May the 10th. Despite searches for the device, Morphew's cell phone was never found.
Which leads me to think that she lost battery at 4:23 a.m.
Or he turned it off. Or
Oh,
if she,
yeah,
if
but
she was already the last text message she sent was 2 in the afternoon and
yeah,
it you know, who
which
knows?
could, who knows?
Battery
Yeah,
drowned it in the river.
yeah,
Especially if the device moved from the house to anywhere else, it would have had to have been off. If it wasn't pinging on any other cell tower anywhere in the world, it would have had to have been off when he took it
yeah.
out of the house. Police interviewed people that knew Barry Morphew prior to his move from Indiana to Colorado in 2018. These witnesses told law enforcement that Barry Morphew was a deer farmer in Indiana. Several individuals told law enforcement that Barry Morphew used a specific tranquilizer called BAM to sedate and transport deer on his deer farm. Barry Morphew admitted to using BAM in both Indiana and Colorado. Specifically, he admitted to using BAM in Colorado as recently as April of 2020, stating that at that time he had tranquilized a deer from the breezeway of the Morphew residence. On September 22nd of 2023, human remains were found in and around a shallow clandestine grave in Saguache County, Colorado. Probably butchered that, near Highway 17. The remains were found a few hundred feet down a dirt road off Highway 17. This location was less than an hour south of the Morphew residence by main highways. The remains were determined to be those of Suzanne Morphew. The majority of her bones were recovered. Many of the bones were significantly bleached. Along with Suzanne's bones, law enforcement recovered a cancer port and items of clothing, some of which were consistent with bike clothing Suzanne was known to wear. There was no visible perimortem trauma observed. A board-certified forensic anthropologist, a botanist, and an entomologist all analyzed the remains, and several observations were noted. There was a distinct lack of bug activity, which was inconsistent with the remains having decomposed at that location. The clothing items lacked evidence of decomposition, which was inconsistent with Suzanne Morphew wearing the bike clothes at the time her body decomposed. Additionally, there was a lack of animal predation on the bones. There was only a very small amount of desiccated soft tissue found on a few of the bones, and there were no hair masks located. All these features would have been expected if this had been the original grave site where decomposition occurred. The forensic anthropologist opined that, based on these factors, it was unlikely Suzanne decomposed from a fresh body to a skeleton at this location.
So she got
Ugh,
dropped there. Oof.
this SOB. Yeah, her body was obviously, it was obviously moved. The El Paso County Coroner's Office. El Paso County. Isn't that where Letitia Stout was at? El Paso County?
I think so. That sounds familiar.
Yeah. The El Paso County Coroner's Office conducted an autopsy. In addition to the standard toxicology testing, the coroner's office conducted additional toxicology testing at the request of law enforcement for the presence of a chemical mixture known as BAM, or the combination of that stuff up there.
Yeah, two big words.
Butorphanol, azaparone, and metamidine. The chief toxicologist tested Suzanne Morphew's bone marrow for the presence of BAM. All three of the individual chemicals that comprised BAM were present. Oh, jeez. Additionally, the metabolite for butorphanol, butorphanol was present. The presence of the butorphanol metabolite eliminated the possibility of postmortem BAM contamination. The metabolite's presence also indicated that her death was not immediate following BAM exposure because Suzanne Morphew's body had begun to metabolize the drug before she died. The coroner's office determined cause of death and manner of death as follows: homicide by unspecified means in the setting of butorphanol, azaparone, and metamidine intoxication, or BAM.
So BAM intoxication, yeah. Hmm.
Oh, I need to learn. I'm going to go back and I will learn to say those words before we do a live.
Yeah.
A pharmacologist and medical doctor testified about the toxicology testing done to determine the presence of BAM in Suzanne Morphew's remains, about the chemical compound itself, and about the possible effects of that compound in humans. The expert explained that the toxicology testing done by the coroner's office met scientific standards of a reliability and accuracy. He further tested that BAM is a chemical mixture of three types of compounds used as a tool for sedating animals for medical treatment or movement. Back in 2020 and the years leading up to Suzanne Morphew's disappearance, BAM was sold by only one company in the United States and could only be obtained by prescription from a veterinarian. BAM must be administered into the bloodstream through intravenous or intramuscular injection to be effective, as the skin and GI tract do not absorb it effectively. BAM does not cause sedation instantaneously but takes several minutes to take effect. BAM is designed not to be lethal and comes with reversal agents in the prescription kit. However, BAM is not FDA approved for any human use. For that reason, there are no scientific studies available that address the possible effects the compound would have on humans. The pharmacology expert testified that the compound would render the recipient wholly immobile, vulnerable, and unable to resist any constrictions to the recipient's ability to breathe.
Hmm.
Oh, that's descriptive and sad.
Do you know where you can find the BAM chemicals? Is
Where you can find them?
Yeah, BAM, the chemicals that was found in Suzanne, is a drug combination to use to immobilize or tranquilize deer.
Right,
In the dart that possibly Barry had contained BAM.
right. I
Sorry,
think that.
just yeah.
No, no, no. I'm just reiterating. Yeah, you're right. You're definitely right. Records were obtained for BAM prescriptions related to Barry Morphew. Records were also obtained for BAM prescriptions for all persons within the counties and adjacent counties to where the Morphews lived and where Suzanne Morphew's remains were located. Those records showed that Barry Morphew obtained and filled several prescriptions of BAM while living in Indiana. Barry
Okay.
Morphew's last purchase of BAM by prescription was in March of 2018. Barry obtained multiple kits that each contained multiple doses just a few months before the Morphews moved to Colorado. Records further showed that no other private citizen or private business in any of the surrounding counties had purchased BAM prescriptions from 2017 to 2020. BAM, sir.
Yep, bam
They got
indeed.
that's bamming evidence. Colorado Parks and Wildlife and the National Park Service were the only entities that received prescriptions of BAM in those counties from 2017 through 2020. Investigators learned that each of these government entities enforced tight regulations to monitor BAM prescription storage and use. None of the BAM from those agencies was unaccounted for. Ultimately, the prescription records show that when Suzanne Morphew disappeared, only one private citizen living in the entire area of the state had access to BAM, Barry
And guess who
Morphew.
that was? Was
Yeah.
Barry Murphy. Wow.
All offenses against the peace and dignity of the people of the state of Colorado. So that's the true bill. And basically, this is the returned indictment and the notary
Yeah.
public that went along with it. This just tells all of his information. They did have a bond hearing, and they set it at 3 million cash only bond. The conditions were no leaving the state of Colorado, a GPS unit, surrender of passport, compliance with mandatory orders, and extradition was authorized if need be.
Yeah, because he was arrested in Arizona and is already
Correct.
for extradition to back to Colorado.
Correct,
So
Mundo.
yeah. So now we're just gonna do like a little bit of a case overview of the case because obviously now we were reading the indictment and everything, and now we're just gonna do like case overview. So Suzanne was 49 at the time, was last seen on May 10 of 2020 going for a bike ride. Her helmet and bike were found abandoned, leading investigations to believe that foul play was involved. The initial charges that Barry was first arrested in May 2021 for first degree homicide, tampering with evidence, and attempting to influence a public servant. The case was later dismissed without prejudice in April 22. So, this was without prejudice means that something was found due to prosecutorial misconduct. So without prejudice is basically meaning that they can come and charge him again, which happened. And what happened was that this prosecutor, Linda Stanley, was withholding, sorry, evidence including a male DNA that was found in Suzanne's SVU. But then later in September 23, Suzanne's skeletal remains were found buried in a shallow grave near Moffat, Colorado, about 40 miles south of their home. And then in 2024, autopsy was found that she died by homicide through intoxication with BAM, the chemicals that we just talked about used for wildfire tranquilization. So in on June 25, literally days ago, a grand jury has indicted again Barry on first degree homicide charges following the body's discovery and toxicology linking to the BAM chemicals. Investigators noted that he was only private individual in the area with access to these same chemicals, and as we say, he's on a bond for 3 million, and now he's waiting for extraditions. He denies everything, says that prosecution is pursuing preconceived narrative from before, so he's remaining his innocence basically.
Well, we know that I don't know. Well, I mean, we're obviously going to wait on trial. Obviously, they weren't going to put him back on trial or weren't
Mhm.
going to indict him again if they didn't have the solid evidence they were looking for. So, frankly, I'm just glad for her. Like, it's time.
Yeah, it's time to have justice for Suzanne Morphew because, from what it seems, there's a lot of suspicion there. Obviously, everyone is innocent until proven contrary, but it sounds like, yeah, we'll wait
Yeah,
for
I
the
don't.
trial.
I was going to say we'll wait for the trial, but I don't see how this could be misconstrued in any type of way. If I'm
Yeah,
being honest with you, just
true.
factually, I don't think that there's anything that I can. And look at this picture of this girl. Look at how happy she's just you can see in her glasses, she's taking her little selfie right here. And she's just happy, smiling with the mountains in the back. I mean, and not to
Um,
be,
yeah.
you know. her life taken from her just shortly after. It's just sad. So
Indeed, and we are going to be following this case because there is no evidence that he is going to plead guilty. So he's going to move on, and we'll be following that trial and everything that comes up with this very closely. So make sure you subscribe both to me and Zia for more information on this case. And yeah, I think that's
I
all for today.
I really appreciate you talking about this, and I appreciate you bringing me up on it. You have a
Of
good day,
course,
Katya. Thank you.
anytime. You too. Bye. Bye, everyone.
And I'm a real time crime professional.